when you engage in such an obvious and glaring conflict of interest in Ukraine, then in Russia, then in China, you're just asking for trouble. I think we're just scratching the surface.
It is Thursday, October 15th, a Biden bombshell and censorship showdown. Emails reveal a link between Ukraine's Burisma Holdings and then Vice President Joe Biden.
But social networks shut down the story. A live report as President Trump calls for the truth.
Senate Democrats square off with Supreme Court nominee Amy Coney Barrett. We're live in Washington, where today witnesses will testify in her confirmation hearing.
And another award show, you guessed it, another You like this song?
I like this song.
You know one of the things I miss most?
What?
With the pandemic? Going to Madison Square Garden and watching Billy Joel. He plays like once a month. I've gone twice now.
Oh.
It is the best concert.
Oh, I've
It
never
is just so
seen.
good.
That sounds
You should
fun.
go. You know, once all this is
2021.
22, 20, 28. Good morning, everybody. You're watching Fox and Friends First on this Thursday morning. I am Todd Pyro.
And I'm Jillian Mealy. Thanks for starting your day with us. Let's get right to this. The fallout growing this morning from that bombshell report on Hunter Biden's emails. President Trump now demanding answers from Joe Biden as the former VP's campaign denies any ties to Hunter's business in Ukraine.
Ashley Strohmeyer joins us live with the fiery reaction on both sides. Ashley, good morning.
Hey, good morning. Yeah, after the New York Post initially released those emails, President Trump followed up at a rally Wednesday night demanding Joe Biden release phone calls, emails, and everything in between in connection to his family's business dealings.
We've just learned through explosive documents published by a very fine newspaper, the New York Post, that Joe Biden has been blatantly lying about his involvement in his son's corrupt business dealing. And this is a big smoking gun.
Those emails showing the vice president's son, Hunter, was allegedly asked by a top advisor at Burisma whether he could use his influence to help stop politically motivated actions against the company. Another email from a Burisma advisor thanked him for, quote, inviting me to D.C. and giving an opportunity to meet your father and spend some time together. Emails obtained by Fox News also show Hunter Biden had plans to meet with State Department officials about the Burisma probe. Now, the information was discovered by the owner of a computer repair shop in Delaware. That man claims Hunter Biden brought in his computer for service back in 2019 and never picked it up. Once he found those emails on the computer's hard drive, he turned it into the FBI. Listen.
Is there any thought in your mind that this might not have been Hunter's and might have been somebody trying to set Hunter up?
No.
Okay.
No.
The Democratic nominee's campaign responded denying any wrongdoing and saying, quote, the New York Post never asked the Biden campaign about the critical elements of this story. Meanwhile, the Senate Homeland Security Committee has launched an investigation into the validity of those emails.
And I take everything that our committee receives, everything I hear with a huge grain of salt, particularly when it's coming from countries like Ukraine that have a history of corruption. He contacted us the day after we issued our report. We have talked to him, but we're in the process of validating his claims. We take it all with a grain of salt.
And more backlash breaking out overnight after social media appeared to censor the story. The New York Post account completely shut down by Twitter, and users were blocked from sharing or distributing the report. Twitter releasing a statement defending its block under its so-called hacked materials policy. Well, CEO Jack Dorsey apologized for the block, saying Twitter's communication was unacceptable. But as of this morning, guys, the New York Post account is still locked down.
It's going to be so interesting to see the fallout from this censorship because people are fired up. Ashley, thank you.
Are. No problem.
So what makes the emails so potentially damaging is for months Joe Biden has denied knowing anything about the work his son did overseas. Take a listen.
Mr. Vice President, how many times have you ever spoken to your son about his overseas business dealings?
I've never spoken to my son about his overseas business dealings.
Former FBI Assistant Director Chris Swecker will join us later in the hour on if and when the FBI got access to Hunter Biden's emails and what agents may have done with that information.
And the social media censorship reaching the White House. Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany saying she was locked out of her Twitter account after she shared the story.
it's not a temporary blockage. When I log onto my Twitter account, it says I'm permanently banned. They essentially have me at gunpoint and said, unless you delete a news story reported by the New York Post, I cannot regain access to my account. This is censorship. It is not the American way. This is not how a freedom-loving democracy operates. And we have to hold Twitter accountable. And Facebook, too, is banning the transmission of the story simply because ideologically it hurts the side of the aisle that Silicon Valley prefers. It's sad. It's censorship. This is not America.
Meantime, the chief Washington correspondent for The Hill is blasting social media sites for censoring the story, calling out their hypocrisy and clear bias in favor of Biden.
This is a grave moment in American history. This is actually a declaration of war by the big tech companies. This is an in-kind donation in the hundreds of millions of dollars to the Joe Biden campaign. These are rules that are flatly false on their face. Think about the material that you laid out. Hacked material is not to be distributed on Twitter. Does that mean that Edward Snowden's account is going to be locked immediately? Exactly. Does that mean that the Pentagon Papers could not be published? Does that mean that FBI, COINTELPRO? Let's even think about this. They said that Twitter said that they could not distribute the story because they couldn't verify the origins. So does that mean that every single story based upon anonymous sources out of our government is going to be locked and banned from Twitter or slowed down, as they put it, from Facebook? No. These rules are selectively enforced in a political manner by the most powerful people and the most powerful companies on earth.
Senator Josh Hawley calling on the Federal Election Commission to investigate Twitter and Facebook over this censorship.
In just hours, the final day of Judge Amy Coney Barrett's Supreme Court confirmation hearing will kick off.
The judge standing her ground as Democrats threw hard-hitting questions her way. Griff Jenkins live for us in Washington with the highlights from day 3. Griff.
They did indeed. Todd and Jillian, good morning. The second day of questioning did not disappoint Democrats, not holding back, throwing a wide range of issues at the nominee, trying to get her on the record about those same hot topics like health care and abortion, but also broadening it. Vice presidential nominee Harris pressing Barrett on climate change.
Do you accept that COVID-19 is infectious?
That's an obvious fact, yes.
Do you accept that smoking causes cancer?
I'm not sure exactly where you're going with this.
Do you believe that climate change is happening and is threatening the air we breathe and the water we drink?
You have asked me a series of questions that are completely uncontroversial and then trying to analogize that to eliciting an opinion on me that is a very contentious matter, and I will not do that.
Into revelation from Senator Amy Klobuchar that Barrett and 2 other current justices worked on the historic Bush v. Gore case.
You, Justice Kavanaugh, and Chief Justice Roberts, who worked on behalf of the Republican Party in matters related to the Bush v. Gore case. Do you think that that's a coincidence?
All these questions, you're suggesting that I have animus or that I cut a deal with the president, and I was very clear yesterday that that isn't what happened.
All day Democrats again leveling accusations against her that she will overturn Roe v. Wade, strike down Obamacare, and help the president in an election dispute if one arises. And they tied her philosophy again to that of her mentor, Justice Scalia.
I hope that you aren't suggesting that I don't have my own mind or that I couldn't think independently or that I would just decide, oh, let me see what Justice Scalia has said about this in the past, because I assure you I have my own mind.
So Judge Barrett is done testifying. Now the committee takes the next steps towards confirmation. They will hear from a panel of experts today as Chairman Graham hopes to have a committee vote a week from today, and he's indicating he has those votes. Todd, Jillian.
All right. Thank you very much, Griff.
The St. Louis couple who waved guns at protesters pleading not guilty to firearms and obstruction charges. Mark and Patricia McCluskey say they were defending their home. They are due back in court on the 28th. The couple sporting Trump buttons while leaving court say they've talked to the president about their case. The governor of Missouri plans to pardon them if they are convicted.
A Pennsylvania county is resending nearly 29,000 ballots to voters. Election officials say a printing error caused voters to receive ballots with wrong information in Allegheny County. The ballots are being corrected. Delivery is expected to start today.
And I'm sure you didn't watch, but the Billboard...
I hope that you aren't suggesting that I don't have my own mind or that I couldn't think independently.
Never sexually assaulted anyone. This whole 2-week effort has been a calculated and orchestrated political hit.
There's a great deal about this process I regret. I regret putting my family through this.
All of the president's Supreme Court nominees forced to hold their own during testy confirmation hearings. So how has Judge Barrett stacked up?
Joining us now to discuss, the senior counsel for the First Liberty Institute, Stephanie Taub. Thank you very much for being here, Stephanie. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. So how do you rate this as far as, how confirmation hearings have gone in the past? How different is this? I guess not perhaps different in the Trump administration era, but different compared to other administrations.
Well, I think she did absolutely phenomenal. If you look at her performance over the past few days, it's clear that Judge Amy Coney Barrett is bulletproof. She came out of the hearings today looking exceptionally well qualified, looking competent, and it is absolutely clear that she understands the proper role of judges. And her story also is very personally inspiring. This is a mom of 7. She is a scholar, a professor, a judge, a clerk to Antonin Scalia, and all the while having this large family. So if confirmed, she will be the first sitting justice to also be a mom with school-age kids. Mm-hmm. She is a true inspiration.
Okay, but how do you compare what you saw from Judge Barrett, let's say? Let's break this down into 2 parts. First, to what happened to Kavanaugh and Gorsuch, but also to previous hearings with other presidents.
Oh, so that's exactly right. So if you look back, there's been a long history of attacks against particularly conservative justices. So these go all the way back to the 1980s when Joe Biden was presiding over the Senate Judiciary hearing and asking questions of Robert Bork. And so Robert Bork was eminently well qualified, but he was essentially attacked because he didn't hold to the political leanings of the left. And so since after Bork, then you have Thomas, who was also subjected to a similar treatment, and you have Kavanaugh, of course, was subjected to the same sort of criticisms. And so here we haven't seen the attacks to the same extent, of course, on Judge Amy Coney Barrett. For the most part, they've avoided actually talking about her. They've talked about other policy issues and especially campaign issues during this confirmation hearing.
Stephanie Taub, thank you very much for your time this morning. It's going to be another interesting day.
Thank you.
It is 17 minutes after the hour. Twitter facing major backlash for blocking the story on Hunter Biden. The surprising twist as CEO Jack Dorsey calls the move unacceptable.
Plus, media meltdown. Critics slamming one network's choice to host a town hall with President Trump.
Why on earth would NBC agree to do that? This is an outright embarrassing ratings ploy.
Good morning. Welcome back. Facebook and Twitter censoring users from sharing the New York Post story on Hunter Biden's emails.
And when called out on it, Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey called his company's communication lapse on the issue unacceptable. Carly Shimkus here with the details. Carly, I feel like we often have communication lapses or the like.
Yeah, and it's interesting because these are, essentially communication companies, right? But yeah, like you said, you posted that tweet. Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey says that his company's communication on this front wasn't good, but they limited the story because it went against their hacked materials policy. But Twitter, of course, not the only company to take action against this story. Andy Stone, a Facebook spokesperson, actually posted a tweet on this saying, "While I will intentionally not link to the New York Post, I want to be clear that this story is eligible to be fact-checked by Facebook's third-party fact-checking partners. In the meantime, we are reducing its distribution on our platform." Stone, by the way, has worked for a number of top Democrats in the past. President Trump also posting a tweet saying, "So terrible that Facebook and Twitter took down the story of smoking gun emails related to Sleepy Joe Biden and his son Hunter in the New York Post. It's only the beginning for them. There is nothing nothing worse than a corrupt politician. Repeal Section 230. This tweet from New York Post editor received a lot of attention yesterday after the story broke. He says, this is a big tech information coup. This is digital civil war. I, an editor at the New York Post, one of the nation's largest papers circulation, can't post one of our own stories that details corruption by a major party presidential candidate, Biden. That's the stinky part of this. That's why this is getting so much attention. And as you've been talking about throughout the show this morning, a lot of Republicans on Capitol Hill, guys, want answers, and they want to make sure that something like this doesn't happen again.
Yeah, and also they've mentioned that hacking line, but they've reported and put out hacking stuff before, Edward Snowden. So, all right, if you ask dumb questions, Carly, and I'm always telling everybody this, I've never told anybody this, you should expect to be mocked. Take a listen, Kamala Harris.
Do you accept that COVID-19 is infectious? Do you accept that smoking causes cancer? And do you believe that climate change is happening and is threatening the air we breathe and the water we drink?
Right. So Kamala Harris was asking those kind of obvious questions to Amy Coney Barrett yesterday just to get to that climate change one and kind of press her on that and see if her answer changed. She was saying yes, and then she wanted to see what she had to say on climate change. But Louisiana Senator John Kennedy, who, you guys know, he is a quote machine. Yep. He mocked Harris's line of questioning by asking Coney Barrett this. Take a listen.
Judge, let's try to answer some of Senator Harris's accusations. Do you hate little warm puppies?
I do not hate little warm puppies.
So good. So I'm glad that we all know now that Judge Barrett doesn't hate puppies. And, those moments of levity, guys, I'm sure are very appreciated during these hours-long hearings, right?
Yeah, and there was one other moment of levity that I think resonated with myself, obviously, and a bunch of other people. Carly, obviously, I think I can speak for you. And it had, I think, so many people being like, yes! Take a listen.
You got some rest last night. I think that's true of all of us.
So I did have a glass of wine. I'll tell you that I needed that at the end of the day.
Well, let me just say on that kind of point, you have a right to remain silent.
The hearing part is over. You can have 2 glasses of wine tonight if you like.
Yeah, I recommend the whole bottle, my dear. I have often wondered how people feel walking into these Capitol Hill hearings and then how they feel when they're done and over. And Coney Barrett summed it up quite nicely, I think, for all of us, guys.
I totally appreciated that comment.
Wine for all.
We all needed a drink after the last 2 days, but I digress.
Thank you, Carly.
Thanks.
See you guys.
First Lady Melania Trump details her experience with COVID-19 and reveals her son Barron also tested positive. Her symptoms included body aches, a cough, headaches, and she felt extremely tired. Barron had no symptoms. They have both since tested negative. In a statement, the First Lady saying in part, quote, "It is my hope COVID-19 will be another obstacle we will be able to tell future generations we overcame and learned from in the process. If you are sick, I am thinking of you and will be thinking of you every day."
Time now, 25 minutes after the hour. Fire.
The Biden family treated the vice presidency as a for-profit corporation. He lied to you over and over.
I take everything that our committee receives, everything I hear with a huge grain of salt. We're in the process of validating his claims.
The Senate Homeland Security Committee launching an investigation after the New York Post report on Hunter Biden's emails from his time at Burisma.
Joining us now to break down the evidence is former Assistant FBI Director Chris Swecker. Chris, thanks for being here. Let's get right into some of this evidence and pull up these emails here. And this one will start here, an email from a Burisma executive to Hunter Biden. This was May of 2014, reading, quote, "We urgently need your advice on how you could use your influence to convey a message or signal, etc., to stop what we consider to be politically motivated actions." Here's another one. This was again from a Burisma executive to Hunter Biden, April of 2015. "Dear Hunter, thank you for inviting me to D.C. and giving an opportunity to meet your father and spend some time together." Chris, what do those tell you?
Yeah, they're pretty close to smoking gun emails. Emails often make criminal cases. It's never fails. Electronic evidence these days is very powerful. So having this treasure trove of information in that hard drive is just the kind of evidence that you need in a criminal prosecution. Having said that, however, I mean, there are different statutes that might apply here, but the federal conflict of interest statute, unfortunately, doesn't apply to the president and the vice president. So you have to look to honest services mail fraud, theft of the honest services of a public official, or even the straight-out federal bribery statute.
Chris, there's also the matter of the supposed inaction by the FBI when they receive this info. Take a listen to the computer store owner.
Why did you fly the FBI?
Fear. A lot of fear. I wish it had gone differently. My perfect day would have been the FBI would have taken it and done justice, but nothing got done.
Okay, so by quick way of background on the computer, it was brought in by somebody. Still don't know the exact person who brought it in. That is not 100% confirmed, but it languished there. Nobody paid for it. At that point, it becomes the possession of the computer repair owner, and then all this followed from there. Brought it to the FBI. FBI did nothing with it. Then all of a sudden, a couple of months later, it ends up in the hands of Rudy Giuliani's attorney. Go back to the FBI for a moment. As someone who knows the inner workings of the FBI, what happened here?
I can't explain it. If I were the head of the criminal division, which I was, if I were the head now, I would have to look into that, and it's almost investigative negligence not taking that computer that might have evidence of a bribery scheme. So I can't explain it. It was 2015, or I'm sorry, it was recently under Chris Wray. I think if Chris knew about it, he would have jumped at that right away, and I'm pretty sure he's looking into it right now to see what happened.
Yeah, so what happens right now within the FBI to try and unravel the details of this, see what was perhaps missed in the last few years? How do you find out all the actual facts of this case? Because at this point, I think the public deserves and wants to know. And to that point, you see social media censoring information about this. So people want to know, and they deserve it.
They absolutely need to know. I mean, this is a money-grubbing conflict of interest, very crass and very pedestrian, and they need to know if their public officials are operating in that fashion. Even if there are no criminal charges that can be filed, they need to know about this, and there may even need to be a legislative remedy here and to extend the conflict of interest statute to the president and the vice president, so we don't see this again. And we're not parsing sentences in the law about whether it applies. It should apply directly to both executives.
Chris, this is a fascinating development in this saga. We will, of course, keep the viewer posted and ask you questions as we learn more information. Chris Swecker, we appreciate it.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.
All right, so let's break this down a little bit more. Let's go through what we know of the timeline, some of the key moments from this timeline. Of course, for time, we can't go into all of it, but here's some keys. 2014 April is the month Hunter Biden joins Burisma, paid at least $50,000 a month. There are some figures that have that going up to $83,000, but we know $50,000 a month. March 2016, Joe Biden threatens to withhold $1 billion in aid if Ukraine doesn't fire prosecutor Viktor Shokin. Shokin was later ousted, and then in May of 2019, the New York Times reports Shokin was investigating Burisma when he was fired. We've talked a lot about the Hunter Biden part in all this, and Chris Swecker did go into some details as to the possible ramifications for Hunter. The big question, though, we have an election in 20 days, 19 days, I believe, at this point. This raises new questions about what Joe Biden knew, when he knew it, and does this matter for the election?
Well, and of course, Joe Biden has been asked this question about his son's overseas dealings on multiple occasions. And if you're just joining us right now, let's go ahead and revisit some of that.
Do you think it was wrong for him to take that position, knowing that it was really because that company wanted access to you?
Well, that's not true. You're saying things you do not know what you're talking about. No one said that. Who said that? There's been no indication of any conflict of interest from Ukraine or anywhere else. Period. I'm not going to respond to that. I've never spoken to my son about his overseas business dealings.
And so, an opportunity tonight for our colleagues over at ABC to follow up on this development. It's going to be interesting to see if they do and how far those questions go.
Absolutely. And we are going to have Congressman Ralph Norman joining us later this hour, so later in the show. So make sure you stay tuned for that. All right, now let's talk.
There's an effort by some in the liberal world to marginalize the contribution because you come out on a different side of an issue. This hearing, to me, is an opportunity to not punch through a glass ceiling, but a reinforced concrete barrier around conservative women.
Senator Lindsey Graham calls out leftist efforts to dismiss the accolades of Judge Amy Coney Barrett in the name of feminism. The Washington Post, just one example, writing, Amy Coney Barrett is a strong woman. That doesn't make her a feminist icon. Joining me to unpack this is senior policy analyst at the Independent Women's Forum, Patrice Onwuka. Patrice, thanks for being here.
Good morning, Jillian. How are you?
Good morning. Great, thanks. You know, it's a shame that we're at a point in time, Patrice, where you can't look at, a woman, her accomplishments, everything she's been able to do in her life, all while raising this, massive family with 7 kids and being a mother. She's so calm and she's collected. I mean, why can't we look at that as an icon? What is the problem here?
Well, I think, unfortunately, it comes down to partisan politics and power. You have so-called feminists who should be cheering the fact that we have another woman who, as you suggested, is a mother, but is well qualified for the job. Not just filling a seat with another woman, but filling a seat with a qualified jurist who happens to be a woman. I think that should be celebrated. Unfortunately, I think the left, the journalists that you're talking about, all of these folks on the left, they want someone who is going to use the bench to enact policy, to be another arm of the legislative tool, rather than really be a jurist, an umpire, and to be faithful to the Constitution, and an originalist, a textualist, all of those different judicial philosophies that I think Amy Coney Barrett espouses. They hate that. They want someone who's going to enact a certain agenda, and that is wrong.
And to my knowledge, I've never seen the definition of icon as being someone who is, exactly in line with all of your beliefs. So, I mean, we should be able to be bipartisan and just be able to look at a person and their accomplishments and say, wow, that's pretty incredible. I rest my case. Moving on, let's talk about social media here for a second, because as you know, Twitter CEO Jack Dorsey has called his company's decision to block the Hunter Biden story without explanation unacceptable. This after Twitter and Facebook both censored it. Now, Facebook came out saying the story is eligible to be fact-checked by their third-party fact-checking partners. Twitter, Jack Dorsey says this, quote, our communication around our actions on the New York Post article was not great, and blocking URL sharing via tweet or DM with zero context as to why we're blocking is unacceptable. What did you make of this as this went down yesterday?
Well, thank goodness that Jack Dorsey actually stepped up and put his personal feelings about President Trump aside to hold accountable his own company for a decision that was really silencing and censoring the media. I mean, we do have First Amendment rights, and part of that is a free press. And part of and social media should be a tool in helping the free press to get messages out there, regardless of whether you agree with what's being said. At least let people decide for themselves. And I think this. I hope Facebook and other tech companies are really reassessing their policies and their standards when it comes to trying to squash certain stories or what they say is going after misinformation. There's nothing wrong in trying to ensure that there's quality information, or that you don't have people sending notes around how to kidnap children or something. But this is different, and this is a story that I think the regular traditional media wants to silence, wants to push off the front page, and kudos to Dorsey for saying no, actually this is not a good way of trying to censor something that let people decide for themselves.
And real quick before we let you go, I want to get your opinion on this. It's going to be a busy night because ABC is having a town hall for Joe Biden. NBC now comes out saying they're going to host a town hall for President Trump. So these are going to be dueling events when it should have been a debate. Many people still scratching their heads at that. But, there have been reports that a lot of NBC employees are very upset with their company for going forward with this town hall. In fact, let's go ahead and just take a listen to a little bit of it.
Are you as mad as everybody else is that NBC is doing a town hall with President Trump?
I know who I'm going to be watching. So there you go.
Why on earth would NBC agree to do that? This is an outright embarrassing ratings ploy. You don't have to do it at the same time and then divide the country further by having them choose.
Okay, so that was obviously MSNBC and CNN. Those were some of the responses. But Patrice, I mean, it is the president of the United States. We are just a few weeks away from a presidential election. What is the problem?
There should be no problem. This is a market competition, and you know what? NBC is going up against ABC. That's fine. But more importantly, you have the president being able to get in front of the American people and take tough questions, which up until now, frankly, Joe Biden has not done a lot of. So why not allow people to choose which they want to see? And you know what? Most people consume a lot of news through video streaming. The clips that go viral through programs like yours, where you guys highlight some of the different issues that are spotlighted. So this is just far outrage and concern that maybe people will want to see President Trump more than they'll want to see Joe Biden.
All right, Patrice Onwuka, thank you very much for joining us. Todd.
Thank you.
Jillian, time now, 48 minutes after the hour. President Trump and Joe Biden in a tight race in the Rust Belt. Pollster Justin Wallen says Iowa and Ohio too close to call right now. He